This is a Parks Canada production. Ce balado est aussi disponible en français.
Welcome to the very first episode of Connected, a Parks Canada podcast. Season 1 will introduce you to species at risk, animals and plants that are in danger of disappearing. We have a great lineup of species that includes the whitebark pine, wolverine, black swift, little brown bat, and westslope cutthroat trout. So check out those other episodes later. But for now, let's talk bears.
I was with my colleague Dylan, and we were on horseback, and we were traveling.
That's David Laskin, a wildlife ecologist with Parks Canada. He plays a big role in the management and protection of wildlife in Banff, Yoho, and Kootenay National Parks. Although David deals with a lot of different species, today we're talking about one in particular, the grizzly bear.
As we're heading up the valley, we saw this grizzly in the distance, in the bottom of the valley, and it was flipping rocks and generally poking around as bears do. But it was directly in our path, in the direction that we needed to go. And we don't want to disturb bears. We just don't want to barge through. On the other hand, we had work to do further up the valley. There wasn't a lot of room to skirt around the bear. As I was thinking of how to pass by discreetly, that's when Dylan just called out to the bear, "Excuse us, but we need to get by. It'll only take a second. Sorry to disturb you." But he wasn't really doing this jokingly. And it was just so sincere and really showed a deference and understanding and respect for these animals that we share the park with. And the bear just calmly stepped up into the forest and let us pass by. And it's just something I'll never forget.
What first got you interested in studying and working with grizzly bears, or was it just something that you kind of fell into?
I was in grad school. I had just finished a course with a new professor who didn't have any grad students yet. And he offered me a job to help map grizzly bear habitat in Alberta. And this was really interesting research because it was part of a huge multidisciplinary effort to study bears and do a census that ultimately helped put a moratorium on the grizzly hunt in Alberta. Because of this, I went on to complete my doctorate looking at seasonality and the effects of climate change on grizzly bears and how they use their habitat.
In 2012, grizzly bears were listed as a species of special concern under the Federal Species at Risk Act. This was because of population declines and threats like losing habitat, or having it broken up into small pieces and being killed along roads and railway lines. Grizzly bears are sensitive to human activity and they don't reproduce very quickly, so it's hard for them to bounce back when their numbers are low. Ultimately, these bears need our help.
It is challenging. We want to ensure that both people and wildlife can safely share these special places, the parks. And it's our job as a team to be the interface. It's sometimes challenging to explain to someone who just traveled from halfway around the world to specifically see a bear, that the one they've just pulled off the road to observe would actually benefit if this visitor just took a quick picture and just kept on driving. So I guess spending a little time to explain why this is the case, by giving the bear space, it will be less likely to grow habituated to people and vehicles. Most of the time, people really get it. You can see this moment where they realize, albeit briefly, that they are in part kind of stewards, and they play a role in conservation. But beyond that, there's broader mitigations that we're employing to reduce conflict. And one is this microhabitat study. Bears, they like areas that are more open. The forest that we associate with the Bow Valley, this kind of mature spruce pine forest, that wasn't always there. We had fires moving through, and this disturbance brought in a lot of vegetation, the key diet for bears. And we don't really have that anymore. So bears are hanging out on roadsides where it's kind of opened up. We intentionally have created a study where we've removed these patches of forest. So kind of simulated that natural disturbance to open up these areas that are a little further away from the Bow Valley Parkway. The idea is it'll pull the bears up into these refugium and away from busy human use areas.
When you're opening up those areas, is that where you're working with the prescribed fire team and you're using that to open up the habitat, or is it more sort of on the ground, hand thinning? What does that look like?
In this particular location, conditions have to be optimal to use fire,
Right.
especially in mature forests. So this was thinning performed by our fire and vegetation crews, and they did a really good job.
So you've opened up this habitat, and to really understand and look at how the bears are using it, does that involve collaring the bears and monitoring them? What does that piece look like?
So now we have these patches, these little attractive nodes on the landscape of quality habitat, and we want to see how bears are interacting with them. And in order to do that, we need to collar bears and put GPS collars on them to know kind of where they are at any given time.
David, how do you actually collar a bear?
Very brave people.
Right?
No, it will use culvert traps.
Okay.
So it looks like a culvert, a big aluminum tube that's bear-sized, and we'll put it in a discrete location that we know bears are going to interact with. We'll try to trap in spring and fall. Bears are a little more bold. And when they wake up from hibernation or they're preparing for hibernation, the drive to get calories kind of overrides their good judgment. We take advantage of that by trapping during those periods because they're smart animals, and to lure them into a culvert, we need all the help we can get.
Yeah.
We bait these culverts with pieces of roadkill and some delicious lure to create a scent that's a mix of rotten cow's blood mixed with fish meal.
If you're a bear, you'd love that.
Yeah, it's quite a concoction. And that gets the scent out. And then in the culvert, we have cameras and a trigger on the door. When it closes, one of our staff members is notified immediately.
Oh, okay.
We'll respond as soon as we can, and then we'll chemically immobilize the bear.
Right.
We'll fit the collar comfortably, and then that collar is turned on, and it will give us a fix.
Do you have issues with the collars falling off, or they're quite robust?
We only need so much data.
Right.
So we have a remote blow-off, the signal that we'll send to that particular collar, and we just tell it to drop. And then we'll go collect the collar when the bear is long gone.
Seeing wildlife roaming in the national park can be a thrilling experience. Knowing how to respond to an encounter is important for your safety and their survival. Give them space. If you're out on the trails, travel in groups, stay alert, make noise, carry bear spray, and know how to use it. Your actions matter. When you leave a national park, leave it wild. Learn more at parkscanada.ca/wildlife rules.
As of 2020, there were approximately 60 to 80 grizzly bears in Banff National Park and 25 to 30 in Yoho and Kootenay National Parks. However, those numbers are just estimates. David and his team want to get a better idea of how many grizzly bears are living in the parks, so they're planning a population trend study. Basically, a count of all the bears.
If we do this at intervals, we can compare this current count to previous counts and then get an idea of the trend.
What method do you use to estimate how many grizzlies are in the park?
This approach will be non-invasive. So we set up hair snag sites. We've all seen the pictures of bears rubbing on trees.
Yeah.
There's barbed wire there that will get some hair, and then from that we get DNA.
Yeah, okay. So from that DNA, you can figure out who's who, and you can track individuals at different sites and see where they're moving throughout the landscape.
Yeah, exactly.
All the work that Parks Canada is doing to protect, monitor, and recover grizzly bears will not only help this species, but have widespread benefits. This is because grizzly bears play an important role in the ecosystem, interacting with a lot of different plants and animals. They are considered keystone species.
When you say keystone species, if people don't know what that term means, it's that all species are important, but some species have disproportionate impact on the ecosystem than others. So like a keystone in an arch, holds everything together. So if you remove it, everything kind of topples. Grizzlies can be considered a keystone species because they have these broad home ranges. They cover a lot of area. And when you don't see grizzlies on the landscape, you kind of know that something's wrong.
Is there one particular message about grizzly bears that you think really needs to be stressed?
I think that grizzlies deserve respect rather than fear. A little bit of knowledge about grizzlies and their behavior to really make people more comfortable and also more safe when out hiking. For example, knowing to make noise when you're out and about will reduce the chance of a surprise encounter. And there's been this long-standing idea that we can't coexist with grizzlies, share the same landscape, but we can, and we know this now.
Do you think you'll ever experience a future without grizzlies?
I think in the future, it's hard to know how grizzlies will do on the landscape. They're generalists. Their diet is 90% vegetation. For the landlocked grizzlies here in the Rockies, where they don't have access to salmon, they have to spend some time, a lot of time, eating different plants at different times in their life cycle. Like the berries, kind of the boon, the caloric event of the season. With climate change, we're going to notice a shift in the rate at which plants develop. We're already seeing the changes with springtime occurring earlier and earlier every year. So we can expect now that we're going to find grizzly bears in different locations and different times than we're used to seeing them. So this might add some challenges for their conservation.
Although there are challenges ahead, we're preparing to face those with continued research, collaboration, and adapting management practices based on the best available information. David tells me that we are seeing more and more bears on the landscape. I hope this trend continues, and I think it's important to remember what's at stake if it doesn't.
Another way to look at it is this loss of a symbol, a loss for us, for humans, this animal that we kind of revere and respect, and is synonymous with wild spaces. And when that is lost, it has an overarching impact.
Plan a trip they won't forget. Sign up for a Parks Canada guided hike to Stanley Glacier this summer and hold a 500 million-year-old fossil in your hands. This family-friendly hike provides an excellent introduction to the Burgess Shale fossils. Journey through fire-swept forests with wildflowers and lodgepole pines, cross a turquoise river and gaze at the Stanley Glacier. Visit parkscanada.ca/Burgess Shale to learn more and book your next adventure.